Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap it up with a special selection for the day, and that's where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's selection comes at us from Sean. Hey, Bryan, this is a piece by an NYC experimental group called Z's, the letter Z, but plural. That's it's an interesting name, just right off the start. Let's see, this is a band that infamously made Howard Stern question what music is on his radio show a long time ago. I have wanted to hear anyone dissect this piece on a compositional level for a long time. It is massive and mesmerizing in such a specific weird way that is hard for me to wrap my head around. The composer of this is Charlie Looker, who has since fronted a medieval noise prog band called Extra Life. Thank you for what you do. All right. Now, Howard Stern, I don't know much about the guy, but I don't expect him to listen to much avant-garde stuff or even experimental stuff. So I don't know just how weird this is going to be, but open mind, right? That's what we do here. Let's see what Z's is bringing to the table with Nobody Wants to Be Had. It's a noisy beginning with a metallic sound to it, but we're in a straightforward 3 pulse. Every 4 repetitions, I'm like, we're gonna move on, right? Okay, that's fun though. There's so much cymbal work going on. I mean, is that just 2 hands rolling on 2 cymbals? It's gotta be more than that. There's 2 percussionists, right? So maybe that is just a crash and a ride cymbal. The ride definitely has a very fast roll on it though. I mean, maybe that's possible. Such is the seductive power of diagonal lines vanishing. No.
it's always already right here. Our promises can't be made or broken, because everything happens at the same time. We won't have our loves ordered according to anything. We would rather live in fear of violence, no longer contained in a holding of hands. It comes and goes
I like
so
the
strangely.
drummer
Where does
using
it
the
go? When the rhythm
rim of the
sacrifice
snare.
becomes unsteady murder, take to the street, blood slip off the altar, top blood everywhere, blood everywhere, blood everywhere, blood everywhere, blood everywhere. Blood we wash off our hands and release from the regular pulse of our hearts.
That's fun.
Stop here. Stop here. Going any further and you'll disappear.
Okay, yeah.
Stop here. Stop
This is the
here.
part I think I've grooved with most, but I'm kind of digging this.
Going any further and you'll disappear.
Why does it remind me of the castle theme from Mario 1 though? I think he turned the snare off too.
I don't want any trouble.
Either that or it's just a very tightly wound tom. Like a high-end tom. The drums sound great though, dude. They are crisp. I love the production on the drums there. They're EQ'd so nicely. I was actually expecting something wilder than this. It's not my cup of tea, and it's definitely esoteric in a lot of ways, but I kind of get it. At least, well, let me put it this way. I don't really understand what it's trying to do. I don't understand the intention behind a lot of the decisions. But usually when y'all give me stuff that's way out there, I don't even understand what's happening. And at least here, I understand what it is. If I needed to, I could transpose this. And I think that is a really helpful thing to be able to do, to at least get what is happening, even if I don't understand the intention behind why they did it. And from that perspective, it doesn't really feel that non-musical to me. And I think it says more about Howard Stern questioning me, or it says more about him with that comment than it does about the music itself. This is rather tame in the larger sphere of avant-garde creations. So, what's going on here? Repetition, honestly, single focus. And I think that's the most interesting thing about this. It is, well, you see, here's the thing. Whenever we have music that I tend to view as very narrowly driven, having a single idea that justifies its entire existence, that usually tends to be drone. Drone is very focused, very single-minded. This is sonically very different from drone, but it captures a lot of that same vibe. Let's just look at the first 40, 50, 60 seconds. I don't remember what it was. Just noise. This shows up a couple of other times in the track too. There is saxophone honking. I don't even want to call it playing. It's honk, 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 honk. It's just like a single note, and it sounds more duck-like than saxophone-like. But I'm pretty sure it's a saxophone. We just have constant pulse coming in here. Bump, bum, bum, bum. We have lots of cymbal work. Like I mentioned, it sounds like there's a really fast roll happening pretty towards the outside of a large cymbal, probably a ride. There's also some crash resonance in here. I still think that we're talking two people here. It feels like something more than four or more than two hands worth can do, but I'd love to see a live version of this. I'm really curious what's going on with the cymbals in that one part. We got a bass kick on every beat. Um, and that's it. It's just noise, but it's rhythmic noise. It has a pulse, it has a beat, it just doesn't have a pattern. Nothing in here changes from beat to beat. It's interesting because I feel this in a 3 pulse, and that means on a 4 bar phrase, I feel this in 12 beats per phrase. And honestly, I was counting out these 4, and eventually, I honestly felt like at the end of every 4, I was waiting for it to move on to that next thing because I have a very low tolerance for repetitive noise like that. But eventually, I was like, and it would be at this point, and then it was. It did change when I expected it to, just not after the 4 bar phrase I was expecting, but it still worked within 4 bar phrases. So at the end of the day, you could write this as such, but the thing about time signature is that it delivers information to the performer. Time signature actually means nothing within a performance outside of the performance itself, right? When I talk about, oh, this song's in 3/4 or whatever, you could write that same song in 7/11, and when someone plays it, it would sound identical. It would not sound any different to you as the audience member. It would be really hard to read, though. It would be really hard to write, and it would be an exercise in technicality. It would not be usable in any way, but it's possible. Time signature doesn't affect the music at all. It's for a composer to convey information about rhythm and time to a performer. And it's why time signature kind of doesn't matter too much in a lot of mainstream music, particularly on the side of rock and metal, where your composer and your performer are one and the same. You don't need to convey information. You know what it's supposed to sound like. You wrote the frickin' riff. So it's kind of a thing that doesn't really exist too much. I talk about it because it allows me to understand and convey information to you, the audience. But as far as whoever's on the guitar playing the song they wrote, time signature doesn't really mean much of anything. But if I were to transcribe this, if I put it into 3/4, that doesn't really convey any information about what's actually happening. In a sense, there's no accented beats here. There's no general pulse. There is just the beat. There's no chord progression. And while I was breaking it up into these 12-beat ideas, that's just for me because a lot of music works in 4-bar phrases, and I was trying to parse what was happening, so I immediately locked it into a 4-bar phrase. I don't even know where I got the 3 pulse beat from because there's nothing in the song that would signify that every 3 beats there's a repetition. That might have just been me trying to, again, put something into a box to figure out what's happening. But honestly, we're looking at 1-beat bars. In a sense, we're in 1/4 here. And I find this really interesting. I tried to do this myself. Was it last year? Or this? Yeah, last year, 2024. I challenged myself to write a song in 1/4 with 1 pulse beats. It kind of doesn't work. You have to de-emphasize everything, exactly what was done here, or allow everything to be emphasized. But the thing is, listeners, we're just going to compartmentalize things into 3s or 4s because those are the most common ways to group up music. But I honestly think that this song is in 1/4, at least for this part of it. And I find that to be really interesting because I challenged myself to do it because I'd never heard a song like it. I had nothing to as a jumping off point. It was just my concept of, obviously you can't have a groove, you can't have pulses, you can't have varying syncopation. Everything has to be even. And so I wrote something rhythmically, at least, very much like this. It's the only way I could think about going around it. And I've been trying to find music written in one four, and it just kind of doesn't exist because it kind of doesn't work. At least not with the biases that we have today, with how music tends to be written and how we subconsciously interact with musical groupings. So I just think it's wild that honestly I would write this in one four because on it, to be honest, there's nothing else. Like I said, putting it into three, putting it into four, putting it into 16 or 12 or whatever, none of it really conveys any extra information about what's going on. It really doesn't matter. It could be free time, honestly, as long as there's a tempo to it. And that's a wild way to start a song. And to lean into it for so long, I was getting aggravated. I honestly was. Like I said, I have a very low tolerance for heavy, noisy repetition. You want to give me drone? Yeah, that's not soothing, but it's not going to aggravate me. This did. I was, jeez, it's like a little kid just calling your name over and over and over and over and over again. It's just like it makes the blood boil. Z's, you made my blood boil. I don't know if that's your intention or not. I hated that intro though. I hated any time that section came up, but it was neat. And it allowed me to talk about 1/4, which is like a stupid, ridiculous time signature. Uh so I guess some positive came out of that. But heavy repetition, that's what this whole thing's about, right? What came after this? Heavy repetition. We had drums. It was just hitting the side of a snare. I think it was a very metallic sound. It sounded like a rim shot without getting any of the reverberation of actually having vibrations going through the snare head. So honestly, I mean, you're just hitting maybe even a cymbal stand, just any metallic part of your drum kit. That rhythm that is being played on the metal part of the drum kit is the same rhythm that the saxophones are playing, is the same rhythm that the vocals are singing. It is a uniform single vision of rhythm here, just like the beginning, just less noisy. In fact, here the noise has been replaced with melody and harmony. I say those hesitantly. There is shifting of pitches and there are harmonized pitches. But what is the harmony here? It kind of lacks it, which is actually interesting in and of itself. I was actually going to take this in a very different direction I had planned, and I just came upon this really interesting revelation here. There's no harmony here. How how do you achieve that? Is it microtonal? I don't think so. The vocal harmonies are solid. In fact, after listening to that for 40 seconds or so, it immediately clicked in my mind. Oh, it makes sense that this composer went on to make dungeon synth or medieval music, or I don't remember what it said. Medieval noise prog. Yeah, the medieval part makes sense. We have some very old harmonic structures here in the duality of the two vocals. I hear that medieval influence in parts of that pretty predominantly. But the saxophone changes notes at different intervals at different times than the vocals. Rarely is it ever complementary in any way. That's really our only points of harmony. Well, if you don't have harmony, normally we look at that as being in the chromatic key, which is just every note. A key is usually when you remove some of the 12 tones to create a specific group of notes. The 12 tones that we use in Western music, anyways. But if you just play all of them, if you look at a piano and you have your 12 keys per octave, your 5 black keys and your 7 white keys, and you just play all of them, you're in the chromatic key. It doesn't really have a defined characteristic, not like major is a bit happier and minor is a bit somber and augmented feels a bit sinister. it's just all of it. It doesn't really have a defined characteristic, but it does have a defined sound. It's pretty easy for me to hear somebody playing in the chromatic key and saying, oh, that's chromatic, but I don't get that here. This is a totally blank slate of harmony. And we just got out of a blank slate of rhythm, too. So much so that I said it could be defined as free time. This is what's blowing my mind. This is what's confused me so much. And it was probably why my face was a bit more astounded at the beginning of the song than the end, because after we did this thing, the rest of the song was just more of this blankness, and it kind of lacked anything that kept my interest, despite having a couple of new ideas. There's some cool stuff back there, but there's also a lot of repetition. This song is primarily focused on being a blank slate of sound. And I find that really interesting. It's I mean, how would I even describe this? So like we have non-written art, non-created art. The blank canvas, the block of clay that's just fresh out of the store that you bought it at. John Cage's 413, 437, whatever that song's called. 4 minutes of silence, right? Art that is the lack of anything done to the medium. But what if this isn't going to make any sense? It doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying to work my way through this. What if you paint a canvas white? What if you take a block of clay, perfectly square, and you perfectly shave off all the sides to get a smaller cube? Doesn't really look any different, but you have done something to the medium. Yeah, see, this doesn't really apply. I don't think, but like in a sense, there's no musical information here. There's a lot of sound, a lot of work being done, but no information. There's no rhythmic focus, there's no harmonic focus. There's noises, there's pitches, there's harmonies, there's rhythms, but all of it is sort of infinite. Yeah, see, that doesn't really work with the other. I don't know how to get this. It just doesn't make sense to me. Um, and it's just it's wild. What else is there in this song? Because I feel like I've exhausted this topic. It does blow my mind though. Like, I don't know. Speaking about rhythms though, like I mentioned, we're sort of in free time at the beginning, but once the vocal melody comes in, there is a rhythmic flow to it. I don't know what time signature we're in here, but we can find these groupings of notes where we will be talking at faster notes like this, very rigid and cemented, da, 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 da. But then we'll cut that in half, da, 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 and turn that into triplets, and then slow it down and bring it back up. And we can group however many these are. Maybe we have 8/16 notes followed by 4 triplets followed by, whatever. And so we can create some sort of pulse out of this. I don't know how symmetrical that ends up being, but at least that makes sense to me. Again, if we look at the vocal harmonies here, it's a very medieval style of harmony, um, but it's just the dyad that we have to work with. They just don't play around with too much of it. We have where they're both the same. I think one where they are a whole step apart and then a whole and a half apart. And that's it. Just those 3 intervals. We don't really get to hear much more than that. For whatever reason, to my ear, that ends up feeling very medieval. But again, it's like we have harmonic information, just like we have rhythmic information. It's just not musical in a sense, but it is transcribable. And I think that's what makes this interesting to me. We also have a guitar, I think, that pops up eventually. And when we look at the guitar rhythms, the saxophone rhythms, the vocal rhythms, they're very different. They come in and accentuate at different points of the song. It begins to feel almost like a hocket in a sense, but a hocket that doesn't resolve into anything. For those who don't know, a hocket is when you have one musical idea. Do 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 do. But instead of one instrument playing that whole lick, maybe one instrument plays the first two notes, another instrument plays the next one, another instrument plays the next three, the first instrument plays the next note, and you just kind of pass it around. The lick itself doesn't change. And you have to have really good synergy between all your different players to have it sound like a full cohesive thing. But once you got it down pat, you kind of have this one musical concept bouncing around from different areas of the stage and with different timbres tied to it. Now imagine a hocket where a bunch of different instruments come together to form a larger idea, except the larger idea kind of doesn't exist. You just have instruments trading off notes. And it kind of feels like a smorgasbord of sounds being thrust at you. And I guess you don't have to imagine it. Z's just did that. And that's how I kind of envision a lot of how the melodic stuff is going on here outside of the vocal stuff, which is pretty straightforward with what they're going for. But everything else feels like a hocket that just doesn't coalesce into anything. It's a series of notes. There's trade offs. Nobody's really holding on to any note, and no one gets to play a vastly larger amount of notes than any other instrument. It just doesn't become any larger concept. It's just a passing of the baton. Once again, a blankness to it. And that's pretty much how this entire song ends up being. Like I said, there's a couple of other unique ideas that show up as we get further into the song, and some of them are neat within themselves, but they all sort of come back to this idea. It's rhythms without a beat, without a pulse. It's harmonies that I can't place. Melodies that don't really go anywhere or do anything. It's the presence of sound without making music, but it is musical. I don't think I would. Well, I don't like being a gatekeeper, anyways. You want to make art, make art. Call it music. I don't care. But this is definitely music. This is a song. I don't think even if I wanted to be gatekeeper, I don't think I would remove that qualification here. But it also lacks a lot of what I view are cornerstones to music. Even avant-garde and experimental music tends to have harmonic cohesion. It tends to have a type of rhythmic groove or central idea. Melodies exist, as strangely or as esoteric as the artist wants to make it. They're there. Somehow Z's has taken these basic concepts of composition and made them hollow, made them empty. There is melody, but it means nothing. There is harmony, but it feels like nothing. There is rhythm, but it's not rhythmic. In a sense, actually, this feels like mathematically driven music. Not any part of it feels dissonant in really any way, other than the pure noise parts. But none of it really forms into something that feels organic, I guess might be the way. As if you created a program and taught it chordal relationships, made sure it never put two notes together that were dissonant or something like that, and taught it about rhythmic ideas and told it to make music. And everything that came out of it, of course, is mathematically driven. No soul, no passion, no artistry, just pure hard rule adherence. What ends up coming out of it is musical. It is a song, but it's lacking that human element to it. It's really wild, and I don't want people to walk away from this with, understanding me to say that Z's put no human artistry into this. I think it takes a lot of understanding of what you're doing, skill, passion, and soul to create something like this intentionally by hand. I think the artistry here isn't necessarily in what they made, but the fact that they made it. And the fact that it feels the way that it does, that it feels like it's robotically driven. I think that's impressive. Like asking a mathematician to make music or a scientist to make music because sound waves are science, because intervals is a lot of math, because rhythms is pretty much straight math. And, maybe the person you ask doesn't really have much of an artistic edge to them, but they can understand that these sound waves would clash, so we need nice intervals between the sound waves that are being played simultaneously. You can create something that sounds coherent, but lacking the art. It's just wild. And all of it is just single-minded driven. There's there's just not really any portion of the song that I think becomes multi-layered in any way. And I think it's fascinating that they can bring so many instruments together, not always ever working together. The noisy sections, yeah, that is like every instrument has one brain cell. They're just hammering down these quarter notes. But outside of those, we have, like I said, the sax, the guitar, the vocals. They're all kind of doing their own things, and yet it all feels singular in vision and execution. Nothing's really working together for a larger whole. It's just making this blankness. All right, Sean. I'm going to go look at some lyrics, but I do want to say that you sufficiently stumped me here while also bringing me music that I lacked the vocabulary to talk about. And the ways that I have spoken about it are not ways I think I've ever spoken about any music. This is quite unique here. Let me see what they're singing about, though, because that whole ending about not going further and being hidden or something like that was it was fun rhythmic stuff, but wild. It is with my utmost dismay and disappointment that I cannot find any lyrics for this. And I know there's lyrics to this. I heard words in there. Not only did I check my usual sources, I even did a Google search, and I don't use Google for anything unless I can't find it anywhere. I use other search engines. I don't like using Google, but Google, sometimes when you have something really niche, they're going to be the search engine that has what you're looking for. And I couldn't even find it there. As far as I'm concerned, these lyrics don't exist on the internet. And they even have a Bandcamp page that they have full control over, I would assume, and chose not to put the lyrics for this song down. Now, they also didn't put the lyrics for any of their other songs down either, so maybe it's not so much concerted effort to disguise what this song is about, more so that they just don't put their lyrics down for anything. But I'm so disappointed. Of all the songs that I've not been able to find lyrics for, this might be the one that I was most eager to read about. And I tried listening to it again. There's too many lyrics. I wouldn't have been able to transpose the whole thing anyways, but they go by so quickly. And with the specific conjoining of their timbres, the two vocalists, it might even be the same vocalist now that I think about it. The timbres are very close. I don't know. Anyways, I can't really make out a lot of words either. I guess we're just gonna have to wrap it up here. If anyone, like, if anyone can find these lyrics in some liner note, translated into a different language on some obscure website, and you could translate them into English, or just give me the other language, I don't care. I will make another video. I'll make a follow-up to this discussing the lyrics. I might even listen to the song again. We'll do a re-reaction. I want to get through those. I want to have an understanding of, at least in words, what they're trying to say with this song. Might help me understand the music a bit more. Until then, though, I suppose these are my thoughts on Zeez's Nobody Wants to Be Had. I wonder how that is. Because, like, in the olden time, pre-2000s, to be had means for somebody to get one up on you. You know, it could be that you've been conned, but it could just also be you've been pranked. You know, somebody just got the better of you. That's to be had. Nobody wants to be had. Yeah, that makes sense. But also, to be had is also a phrase of being born. That was the year we had old Bryan, right? So, is it nobody wants to be born? Is it the duality of that? Because honestly, like I said, the one phrase I don't think most people are using anymore, and the idea of to be born, that's sort of an obtuse way to write that. It's I think understood by a lot of people, but it'd still be easier to say nobody wants to be born. So is the duality intentional? Here's where the lyrics would have been nice. Anyways, dang. This song's got me thinking. What are your thoughts, though? Does this song have you thinking? Put your comments, opinions, interpretations, any thoughts you have down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.